shit internet apologists say.
Okay, so I have with us today an article about new independent fundamentalist Baptist preacher Jason Graber. No relation to Jason Sherwood. So
I'm
this
not
this
sure that's how that
lovely
works.
it totally is. This specimen of a human being holds the belief that any kind of education about LGBT uh, sex education is grooming children and is showing them pornography. Although I can imagine by pornography, he means two guys in a relationship, holding hands, kissing, whatever, maybe. It's not really specified in the article, but it's implied by his lack of, actual pornography. Um, What's really shocking about this one isn't that it's a Christian out there that doesn't want public schools teaching us about any sort of other than a cisgender, same, opposite sex relationship. It's what he wants to do about it. So he is calling on the United States government to lay down their guns, pick up their swords, and hold public executions for any teacher who is teaching kids about sex education in any way that to him from his very fundamentalist perspective would be considered unsafe or grooming. And again, we're not talking about showing kids actual porn. We're talking about talking to kids about other relationships, male female, male male, like just different forms of genders, that kind of stuff. He's saying is grooming kids um potentially to take up those quote unquote lifestyles. Not that that's what I believe it is. I believe it's just a part of who the person is. But so this is kind of appalling. Like the same people who are shouting about people in the Middle East, beheading people for the exact same reason are now calling for the exact same actions just under their version of God. So it's a bit ironic, it's a bit infuriating, but most of all, to me, it's frightening. It's downright scary that we have people in our country that are so passionate about this, and he's not joking. Watching the YouTube video that's linked inside the article, he's serious as a heart attack. So, what do you guys think about this? What were your initial thoughts?
Oof.
Well, my initial thought is, where is the investigation? Where is the investigation?
Right.
I mean, we've seen a lot of hate speech all over the place. We see it in Westboro Baptist Church, where they would hold up signs with such vile and vitriol, but they don't necessarily say, they say death to people. They don't say you should go out and then kill them. And so it's really this is more of a direct threat. He's saying
Mhm.
specific actions: behead people, kill them, murder them in the
Right.
streets. Execution. It's there has to be some kind of investigation. And when are we going to see it? Are they just going to go ahead and hide behind, religious freedoms? I'm just saying, what my God thinks I should be saying. I don't know. Teo, what do you think?
Yeah, no, this is a whole mess. I was going to say that I love articles written by Hemeth Mehta, and I like this, but for me, he messed up in the title because the title was that a preacher says that teacher grooming kids should be beheaded on live TV. And for a moment, I thought, oh, is this televangelist trying to talk against Catholic priests who have raped children? But then you read and realize that by grooming, he means teaching about LGBTQ acceptance. I mean, what the heck, man? What the heck is wrong with this guy? Imagine being a teacher and being told that you should be murdered just because you dare talking about equality. I have always said that I'm extremely scared of the USA turning into a theocracy. Guys, you scare me more and more every single episode in here.
You think you're scared? We're living it. So,
Right.
I mean, we're seeing it firsthand. I live, less than 30 miles away from the Capitol. So again, yeah, it is pretty frightening. And I do think it's also ironic that this preacher is talking about grooming, because just like you said, Teo, is this really, this is about the Catholic priests who, are touching on the choir boys, or, that law in Tennessee that thankfully failed to advance, that would effectively remove the age limit for marriage. I'm sorry, but that is grooming. That is actual grooming. That is, that's not just saying, oh, I'm going to teach you that love exists and that people can go ahead and love any way that they want to. No, that's a way of saying, hey, I'm going to go ahead and, talk to Bob down the street because I really like his daughter. That is so disgusting and disturbing. But that's what that law could have effectively done. How do you reconcile that with proper education? I don't know.
Well, so where's the outcry for that, right? He's outcrying teaching kids in public schools about anything LGBT related, calling it even pornography, which I realize now is a very subjective term. But you don't see those same people calling an outcry, you know what I'm saying, for the same, because it comes from a purer place, right? That you can set a woman up to be successfully a wife in her Christian walk for the rest of her life at a very young age. It's a beautiful, pure thing, right? But teach your kids about, and I'm saying that way tongue in cheek for people who aren't getting it. But teach people that two men can love each other, and oh my God, let's just fall apart over and take the teacher, like, not take the teacher out who's even just talking about it and cut his head off. I
Yeah.
mean, it's horrible the amount of violence that and hate and vitriol that the LGBT community puts up with. But now you're talking about, like, even discussing it is now something that this gentleman is saying should be a crime. And
Yeah, he wants. Oh,
Yeah, this is
no, go
the
ahead.
worst that I've been seeing of it. Because I mean, we've talked about other hate preachers like Greg Locke and Kenneth Copeland, and they're
Mhm.
absolutely disgusting. But none of them have come. They've skirted the line. They really have skirted the line. And when they talk about pornography in schools, one of the things that they try to bring up is the book Genderqueer.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, they're showing kids actually engaging in acts, and that is simply not true. There is one, because I didn't read the whole book, but I did go through it. It's 241 pages of graphic novel, essentially. And I just started reading it a couple of days ago, so it's like, yeah, I didn't get a chance to get all the way through it. But there
Right.
was one panel where the author and one of their childhood friends were, they lived in a rural area where there wasn't any electricity, and then they didn't have internal plumbing. They had an outhouse, and it was terrible. So kids, being young kids, they would sometimes pee in the field, and the author drew that. The other thing that the author drew was a fantasy that Air had, and that's EIR. That's the pronouns that they're using. Air using. And that one was a little bit more graphic, but again, the drawing was of people of consent age, and then the final one was of the author going to a doctor's appointment where they were getting undressed. Those were the only three things, and this is not a book that was made for kids. It's very clear.
Right.
The art style could seem like that, but the book itself, the content, obviously was not.
Yeah,
I
well, and
think
that is the inaccurate accusation there, is that the education is being geared toward children, that there's pornographic materials being geared toward children. And that's simply not true. Like, you're sort of taking a bit of a piece from over here and a bit of a piece from over there, and you're shoving them all together and you're presenting this package. And I can see sort of outrage. I can also see a lot of parents saying, well, at a certain age, especially if it's geared towards high schoolers, at a certain age, some level of realistic imagery is actually helpful, right? Like we do anatomy classes with teenage kids, and to actually show what the body looks like is absolutely appropriate and helpful. Um, so there's a lot of spinning going on here with what he's saying, and there's a lot of painting pictures. What really scares me about that isn't him and the fact that he's deliberately lying in order to bolster his case. It's his congregation that's hearing it, right? Or anybody on the freaking internet who's hearing it, honestly, because it's a YouTube video, right? It's recorded.
Yeah,
So
people supporting
so
him.
yeah, people aren't gonna go and double check and look through the book and check the actual curriculums at these public schools that these teachers are teaching. They're just gonna get pissed off. And if there's even a whisper of gay or queer or like any kind of sex positive sex education, and it's just gonna be this huge outcry, right? Without any understanding of what's really going on.
No,
Absolutely.
this guy is definitely for hatred. Please, guys, check the article. Hemeth links actually a couple of tweets where he mentions how this the name is Jason Graver, this hate preacher. Straight up, he calls up for execution of anyone guilty of homosexuality, as if being gay was a crime. Can you imagine? Oh no, you discover your sexuality, you have to die. It's awful. And also there is another one when he talk about somebody saying that conservative Dave Rubin is a flaming sodomite and he and his partner should be immediately executed. I mean, he's even calling politicians to be murdered, and he's doing this publicly. He's openly saying that they should be murdered, and based, as you said, in lies. I love what Hemet wrote here. Quoting, he went from claiming that teachers are showing pornographic images to kids, which is a lie, to saying they must be pedophiles, which is also a lie, to say they should be executed with a gun to the head. What the fuck? To saying we should publicly behead those teachers on live television. What the fuck? X2 two times. And yeah, it's awful. And as my good friend Colson said, it wouldn't be surprising if a member of his congregation went and committed acts of violence against anyone, either LGBTQ person or just a teacher, a regular teacher, not even a teacher who's talking about that, just a regular teacher for the crime of being a teacher. Because this rhetoric of this guy is dangerous. It's awful. Oh, guys, I'm so scared for you. And I think that this type of people is the reason why this type of activism that we are always doing is so important and is so necessary. And we have to talk about the harms of religions. I'm scared. That's it.
It's absolutely a step backwards in progress, in history, in human values and human rights. Like it is absolutely a step backwards just to have this kind of stuff be said and publicized and not have any sort of action against it. Like I'm not all about like limiting free speech, but I am definitely all about not promoting violence and calling for the harm or death of others. And that is absolutely what this is. Whether he says, oh, well, I meant the, government to do it. Doesn't matter. You're firing up a congregation of people with hate speech. And so my brain went straight to let's reverse the situation. If you had a queer community calling for the death of Christians, how fast would that community be silenced? And this is just an open-ended, like rhetorical question to think about. But when you turn the tables, would that behavior be even remotely tolerated? I would hope it wouldn't be.
We sometimes joke about bringing the lions back and everything, but none of us are. If anybody said it in such a serious way, then yeah, they would point to, oh, look at the mean atheists. They hate us and they want to kill us, and that's they're incredibly violent. And are there atheists who are hateful and do think like that? Yes, I mean there's everybody in every group, but as a whole, atheism doesn't say let's kill one group or another. They would rather by and large educate somebody so that they can get out of this kind of thinking, so that they can remove their indoctrination. And it really doesn't take much effort. It's like, this is just, one little hate preacher. What does that matter? It, it- we had a guy who decided he wanted to listen to conspiracy theories about a pizza place down in Washington, D.C. and
Right.
shot, luckily he didn't, do too much damage, but he brought his gun there, an AR-15, and, he let off a couple of rounds demanding to see a basement that didn't even exist.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't take much imagination that one of his congregation could say, hey, wait a minute. I remember, Mrs. Smith, my kid's, third grade teacher. They said some really odd stuff and I was really concerned about it. Why don't I just go up there and kill them
And behead them
and
publicly
behead them?
on yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
And
And
you know,
go
no,
ahead,
I
Theo.
wanted to say there are three atheists in here. The three of us are activists. If I decided to go violent and say that somebody deserved to be killed, I'm totally sure that neither of you would support me. Most
No.
likely, no one on the ACA or any of the shows. Most likely, no one that I know that is an activist would support violence. But we have this guy, and he has followers, and he has people actually listening to him. And something that Laura mentioned, there is no censorship. Do you remember, Laura, when I made this joke about how stupid it is that in the USA the C for caliente is cold and the H for helado is hot, and I got banned because of that. And
Because C is cold and H is hot. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and this guy just goes and says that they should be murdering people, and nothing happens. And he has followers. I mean, what the heck is wrong? Ugh.
They are protected by the word of God.
Apparently.
Yeah. I want to delve in a little bit into the psychology of this. And I know it's not something that we can cover in the scope of this show, but it's more than just his psychology. It's almost like the social atmosphere and the social sort of thinking here. Like he's representing a larger group of people. He's not the only one that feels this way, clearly. Like
Right.
there's still a lot of hate speech out there, especially towards the queer community. And you have to really step back and think what kind of programming gets a man to be like this, like gets him to draw this conclusion. Someone who perhaps in any other situation would find that kind of behavior abhorrent if it was another religion doing it, if it was being done to his religion. If he was faced with something like that kind of a threat based on quote unquote who he is, like pick aspect A about his personhood because that's really what queer aspects are. It's like I have red hair and I'm queer. That's all it is. It's not like I Republican, Christian, Democrat, whatever. It's a different part of a person's personality, right? It's something that is inherent to who they are. And so
Yeah.
take something inherent and say, I'm gonna kill all people with X trait and see how he feels about that. And so what happens in the minds of these people that suddenly, because they hate this group or are so uncomfortable with this group so much, it becomes um justifiable. Like it becomes okay, if not um something that they celebrate or are pushing.
The worst part is that we probably won't ever truly find out because
Right.
it would take somebody to really sit down with them and dive deep into, who and what they are.
Mhm.
And they probably won't do that because they don't think there's anything wrong with them. Um, I think that's a good jumping off point for this. This is definitely something that, you know, hate preachers have definitely been a fountain of content for the nonprofits. And,
Mm.
I guarantee you we're going to be covering another one at some other point.